Probably by now you have already heard about the allegory of the cave, but is there more to this than what we already know? And what is its relevance in our modern society? So let's recap a bit. For those of you who doesn't know about this allegory, it is part of Book 7 in Plato's The Republic that was written about 2,400 years ago. The Republic takes the form of a philosophical dialogue led by Socrates, Plato's mentor, as he examines concepts of justice, what an ideal society and its rulers should be like, and reflects on what it truly means to live a good and meaningful life. The allegory begins inside a cave. Now, to help you visualize it, I created a three-dimensional version of the cave. Let's divide it into three levels so the concept is easier to understand. At level 1, which is the lowest and darkest part of the cave, there is a group of prisoners chained to a wall. They have been there since childhood, with their feet and heads bound, so they can only look straight ahead at the wall in front of them. Now, before explaining what they see on the wall, it is important to first understand what happens at level 2. Behind the prisoners is a low wall, and behind this low wall is a raised path. This raised path, there are different people walking and carrying various artifacts that extend above the wall. Behind the raised path is a fire. Now you can imagine, as a result of this, the fire casts different kinds of shadows on the cave wall in front of them. Remember the cave wall that the prisoners were looking at in level 1? Well, they can only see the shadows cast by the artifacts and the sounds they hear from level 2. Because the prisoners have known nothing else since childhood, they mistaken the shadows as reality and construct their own truths from their mistaken assumptions. Now let's move to level 3. Above is an opening of the cave that leads outside. Imagine if one of the prisoners is set free. He is broken from his chains and allowed to look behind him at the raised path. At first, the light from the fire would hurt his eyes. He would be dazed and confused. Even upon seeing the objects whose shadow he once saw, he would not believe they were more real than the shadows. After this, he is moved further upward toward the mouth of the cave, where he is exposed to sunlight. Just as the fire initially blinded him, the sunlight also causes pain and confusion. Over time, however, his eyes adjust, and he begins to see reality itself rather than mere shadows. Now, it is at this point that he ultimately realizes that the sun is the source of all life, and understanding beyond the cave. He realizes that the prisoner's perceived truth is not real knowledge, but ignorance, and he feels pity for them. Now, armed with this true knowledge, the freedman decides to help the other prisoners and returns to the cave. Plato notes that when the freed prisoner returns to the cave, his sight struggles in the darkness and is mocked by the other prisoners. Plato suggests the burden from learning, and that when people try to share about this true knowledge, it is often ridiculed rather than understood. Finally, he attempts to free the other prisoners from their ignorance. Instead, he is met with mockery, resistance, and even the threat of violence. Now, what does this mean in the context of our society? At this point, it should be clear that the allegory conveys Plato's lesson, the necessity for pursuing virtue and wisdom, and the way society often resists or even rejects it when first confronted with it. As an example, perhaps, the most immediate thought that comes to mind is the crucifixion of Jesus, who sought only to spread the good word, yet was ultimately condemned and executed for doing so. Now, for sure we can extract lessons from this, but they amount to nothing if we do not fully internalize it and fail to put them into practice. Now let us break this down a bit. Well, the prisoners then are us, when we become ignorant of what truly lies behind our actions, when we fail to question or properly examine perceived norms, and when we accept things at face value. The shadows and the figures carrying the objects can be understood as the source of illusion, whether intentional or not. Things produced in a modern world, such as brand marketing, misleading advertisements, and unquestioned social norms. These forces shape perception and belief, becoming deeply ingrained in society with little to no resistance, despite their often pernicious effects. Remember the different levels? Well, they symbolize the progressive stages of knowledge. Reaching the top signifies the struggle to attain true understanding. In Eastern philosophy, this can be translated to the pursuit of nirvana or moksha, the awakening that comes from transcending ignorance and worldly attachments. Apart from this, Plato also suggests that breaking free from ignorance and confronting deeper truths is inherently painful. Not just pain from the struggle involved in attaining it, like studying or even disciplined practice of meditation, but the pain of realizing that beliefs upon which one has built one's life may, upon scrutiny, be nothing more than fallacies. What's amazing is that even 2,000 years ago, these very tendencies existed in society, and even persist today. That those who challenge the widely held but flawed beliefs of society are often met with skepticism and resistance. Now, having interviewed scientists and other learned individuals, it has become clear that our society offers little support for this kind of pursuit, whether financially or just mere attention. Instead, our society prioritizes more dopamine hits, instant gratification, like, well, you know what it is. This goes beyond the shows and content we consume. It also influences how we vote our leaders, making us more likely to follow populist appeals than lean on expert insight.
Kayo ang unang makikibahagi sa biyaya mula sa ekonomiya at mula sa pamahalaan.
Can we truly call the Philippines a hub of knowledge and ideas? As long as we remain drawn to entertainment and the trivial, well, partly because of our brains wired perhaps to seek easy pleasure, but there's little hope of seeing beyond the falsehoods that thought leaders strive to dismantle. Plato's Allegory reminds us that growth requires effort and dedication. By reflecting on it and pursuing self-actualization, we can rise above this ignorance and become more conscious, even responsible citizens, shaping a society that values truth, not illusion. Before we end, I think the question to ask is, where do you see yourself in these levels? Or can we say that all these levels reside in all of us? That we are just as capable of falling into ignorance as we are of seeking the truth? Salamat sa pagtanaw hangtod sa katapusan. I hope you have learned something and enjoyed this video. If you find value in this message, feel free to share this to your friends. Hit the like and subscribe button. Your support would be really appreciated. And I hope to see you on the next video.